Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Mr. Rory Richards. Mr. Richards, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. It's very good to be here.
Man, it's a pleasure. But before we get into the conversation, I know you have over 20 years as an educator. You are a educational transformative leader. And the work that you're doing, especially as a Black male, I know it is very important, especially in the education sector. But before we talk more about what this conversation is about, I would love for you to share with the audience more about yourself so they can get an understanding of who you are as we get into the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Cross. And thank you for the work that you are continuing to do in this space. You know, it's a work that is well needed, and it's a work that can only advance the welfare of the Black male in America, and I dare say internationally. As you said, I have over 20 years of experience in education. I've been an educator since 1993, thereabout. I first got my experience in Jamaica. Now, in Jamaica, there is this service where you have a pre-trained teacher. That's a teacher who is put in the classroom before they enter college. You might leave with a certain amount of subjects from school, and they find that you have the ability and they put you in the classroom. And it was there that my love for education developed. I then went to the Michael University College. It is called now. Then it was Michael, just the Michael. Now it's the Michael University College. I got a diploma in education, specialized in English and physical education from that college. I then went to the University of the West Indies. After teaching for a couple of years, got a bachelor's in education, specializing in English language and literature. And so my teaching career has taken me from the classroom to the halls of government, where I assisted the Minister of Education, Youth and Culture. I was the special assistant there for some time, after which I came to the United States and continued my career here.
Oh, in education.
In education, absolutely. I came upon this program called the Visiting International Faculty Program. My then wife and I, and we lived in North Carolina for a while. But in North Carolina, I never really got the traction that I had expected to gain there with regards to my career goals and the arc that I wanted to follow, the career arc that I wanted to take. So I moved on to California, then to New York here, where I did a master's in education. And now I'm pursuing my doctoral studies in higher education, administration, and leadership.
Oh man, that's awesome. I see that you have an array of experience, not only in one space, but in several different places. So that means you have met different people, you have learned different personality. So it prepares you to work with anyone, I would say, just listening to your experience from Jamaica to here, and now Brooklyn, right? New York.
That's correct.
That's right. Still going in education. And now we know, like in the States, where they always be trying to get more Black men in the classroom, in education, to inspire and educate students. But as I shared with someone earlier, that Black men don't only empower Black males, students from research. They find that all students benefit greatly from Black male educators. So again, man, welcome to the Black Male Impact, and thanks for sharing your bio. And we're going to get into the conversation itself.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. So my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
That's a great question, Dr. Cross. I like to think of the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact as a learning mindset,
Okay.
where you have that mindset to learn, to continue to learn. And that includes a couple of things. I think it includes what we would call a growth mindset, a sense of relevance, and a sense of belonging.
Okay.
And let me explain a little bit what I mean there. When you have a growth mindset, you realize that effort leads to growth.
Correct.
When you're pursuing a goal, when you're pursuing a dream, you realize that effort leads to growth. And if you can pass this kind of mindset on, then you can begin to have a positive impact. You also realize, Dr. Cross, that persistence through difficulty also leads to growth. So
Correct.
effort combined with persistence through difficulty, because life is not easy, you know, and the things we have to face each day, it's not easy. And that leads to growth.
Yes.
And I think you have also a recognition that learning from mistakes leads to growth. And learning from mistakes doesn't necessarily only mean learning from your mistakes.
Correct.
Learning from mistakes of others, learning from mistakes of our foreparents, of our friends, of our mentors, of the people that we interact with. Always examining the actions of others, your actions, always reflecting and seeing where you went wrong and what you can do better. And then to have that positive impact, you have to challenge yourself.
Correct. Yes.
Because not every situation you encounter or enter into is an easy situation to grasp, to maneuver, to manipulate.
Correct.
Sometimes the situation seems beyond your expertise.
Correct. Yes.
If you're able to challenge yourself, you'll find that you can have that positive impact on whoever it is or whatever situation it is. I often find that I experience that in the classroom quite often, where even though I have multiple years of experience in education, there are situations that I encounter that I have never encountered before. And I have to challenge myself to explore new ways of thinking and new ways of approaching situations to be able to think outside of the box. And I think finally what I would say on that is having that growth mindset means that you're seeking out new and appropriate strategies.
Yeah, to make progress. So
to make progress.
yes, and I go back to where you start off by having a learning mindset, which leads to a growth mindset, because that's what growth mindset is about. You being willing to learn more, not settling where you are. And I like what you said. Although you have many years in education, there are going to be situations that you are not fully aware of, because that's life. Things change.
Right.
But have that willingness to learn, to realize that what I can get through this situation because I'm going to open myself up to learn more. So having a learning mindset, I believe, as you shared, is a great way to make a positive impact, because once we learn more, we're more knowledgeable to make the impact that we want. So it's not approaching life saying, I don't know something, but I can learn what I need to learn so I can achieve what I need to achieve, or to make the impact that I want to make in life. So I really appreciate that perspective. And I think the listeners will as well, because at times we as individuals may think we cannot get out of our situation, the situation that we find ourselves in. And sometimes it's not something that because of what we do, it's just life. But to realize that, well, I can learn to get out of this situation, I can learn to get better as a person. So I really appreciate that perspective. So my next question is, what advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
I really am happy about that question, because positive change is essential to the growth of any community, any group of people, any society. Change is inevitable. Without change, there is no growth. And without growth, it means that we're stagnant, we're dead. And one of the things I have noticed and sometimes bemoan is that we don't have enough coaches and mentors and sponsors among Black men. What do I mean by that? And there are differences here, Dr. Cross. There's a difference between a coach, there's a difference between a mentor, and there's a difference between a sponsor. A coach produces guidance for someone, while the mentor actually informally informs and helps that person to grow, while the sponsor is that person's greatest champion.
Yes.
The sponsor announces the skill of that person. The sponsor talks up that person, talks about that person in meetings or in workspaces, tries their best to open doors for that person. And I think we need more of these things within the Black male group. I think as Black men, we need to reach back, so to speak, when we have arrived or even on the journey. Take somebody along with you, groom that person to be your successor or the next great thing. Always be mindful that there is enough pie for everybody. So therefore, you can groom someone to be better than you. And
Correct.
that's how you develop continuity within groups, especially the Black population. We know this, the crisis that we face as Black males. We've spoken about it so many different times. We have less enrollment in schools. We tend to persist less than other groups. We tend to achieve, there's an achievement gap between us and other groups. And we're always viewed from a deficit perspective. Black men. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to what you were talking about with the mentor, coach, and sponsor. I really love that perspective or analogy when it comes to us moving forward, when it comes to us making progress. Yes, we need the guidance. We need to be shown the way. We need the information that can help us. But the point that you made that I believe we need right now more than ever are sponsors, those who will call our names in spaces that we are capable of doing the work. We need more door openers. We need more of us who are willing to lift as they climb or lift or reach back, as you mentioned. Because if we're going to make the progress, we know that there are some doors that will not open for us, even though we're qualified to get into those spaces. And if we're in those spaces, we now need to be champions for other Black males, because it doesn't only help the Black man per se, it helps his family, his community, and it helps to make the country or a place better, because we're getting more out of life, so then we're able to contribute more to life. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Absolutely. And it's really very important because within a society or within systems that we often and spaces that we often traverse, there is an institutionalized, I would say, subjugation and marginalization of the Black male. And having to consistently prove your self-worth, you're looked at from a deficit perspective, and having to consistently prove your self-worth can be very exhausting. You'll hear the anecdote of saying that a Black person has to work 3 times as hard or 6 times as hard as any other person just to get the same results in society or just to get the same recognition. And even when you have worked that hard and you have gotten yourself, for example, the qualifications, people still do not want to recognize you for that. And you find that the Black male is often underemployed or unemployed, If they are employed, they are not employed in positions that they are trained for and that they can excel in. And even if they are employed in these positions that they can excel in, sometimes they are paid much lower than other groups. Quick anecdote, a gentleman who is the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at one of our institutions in the United States here told me about his experience where they took him on the executive board, and he was the lowest paid executive there.
Wow.
In fact, he was so low, below, you're talking about maybe 10, 15% lower than the rest of folks there. And when he found out, he pointed it out. Not only was he the lowest, he was the only Black person there.
Wow.
So immediately you had a diversity and a pay equity issue.
Yes.
And when he approached it, people were offended. However, they were cornered because they had boxes that they had to check.
Yes.
And they had to bring him up. But of course, he left afterwards and he got a better offer. But these are the things that we often face. And unless you and I and others who might find themselves in a position to help someone, to bring them up, to champion them,
yeah,
going to find that the hurdles are much too high for some people to surmount without that kind of assistance.
Well, and you're right. And not all of us have the resilience, the grit to stay the course until that breakthrough happens. Some will give up, some will just settle. And that's why, as you mentioned, it is important that we become champions for each other, help each other to get up to where we are capable of getting once we're in the position to help. But we have to realize, as you all mentioned earlier, that enough pie is out there for all of us. Sometimes people may think that if someone gets a pie, they will not get a pie. But we have to understand that there is enough for all of us. And I will forever remember those 3 points that you have made with coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring. And I think those are really great approaches to take in moving the needle forward when it comes to us as Black men. So that leads me to my next question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative? And what you just shared can help change the narrative, but you can dig deeper or share something else that you find that will help to change the narrative for us as Black men.
I think we have to be willing to change, to adopt new ideas and new ways of thinking, but also to collaborate more. I read an article the other day, and it was looking at, and no aspersions being cast or anything, but it was looking at some of the wealthiest people, Black people in the United States. And you found that they all existed in these silos. And no doubt they're doing charity work, and no doubt they are doing work that we don't know about. But there doesn't seem to be a collaborative approach across the board where we recognize that unity is strength. You know the old adage, united we stand, divided we fall. So therefore, you find that many other communities develop business communities. You rarely find Black communities where you have an expansive Black community that is solely dedicated to businesses. Many other communities own things like banks and develop their own schools. You rarely find that in our Black communities. The 3 main institutions that are needed to develop any community: the bank, the school, the post office. You rarely find those positioned directly in the Black community and by the Black community. And I think that's because we don't collaborate enough. We don't recognize the strengths that we have in each other, and we don't try to pool our resources, and we don't try to pool our strengths together. I think that is a a problem. There are other issues that I could look at and other ways that I could drill down into, but I see you wanted to interject.
No, I was just going to piggyback on what you said with collaboration and working together, using our strengths or using our resources. Because I do believe we have enough resources and we just
Mhm.
have to figure a way to make the resources that we have work for us and to help change some of the challenges that we do face.
Mhm.
Because I think it boils down to what I see sometimes is like we're waiting on others to do for us what we are more than capable of doing with the resources that we have. Is just how we use the resources and be intentional about it. And I think, as you shared, we are operating in these silos. Yes, we have great success, but how much of that success really helping to push us forward? So when you were talking about the collaboration and working together and realize that unity is strength, it really press that button. That is something, because that is something that becomes so evident in regards to where we are, but where we can go will rely a lot on collaboration and realizing that we within our communities do have the resources to help us move forward, but it's how we use it.
Absolutely. And another component, another thing that I think we need to really begin to emphasize, and many writers, many researchers, you yourself, in many of your books have been, and your posts have been emphasizing this. We need to put education
Yeah,
front and center once again. I think the importance of education seems to be receding within the Black male community for a number of reasons. You look at the numbers, you find that uh, only 40%, 47% of black men are enrolled in colleges. Eligible Black men are enrolled in colleges, as opposed to Black women, 60, I think 61%. And there are a number of things that cause this, Dr. Cross. One of them is that the Black man has historically been placed in a position where he thinks he must provide in
correct.
order to represent himself as a man. And there is nothing wrong with providing, but you have to set that foundation to be able to provide. And then the role models that we see within our communities most of the time, many of the times, unfortunately, do not model positive growth characteristics.
Correct.
And so we see, for example, too many drug dealers being held up as paragons of virtue and beacons of life. We see too many Black men who do not necessarily want to do right being held up as someone to look up to. We need to
Correct.
begin again to put education front and center and realize the value of education and realize how education allows you to become mobile or increases your social mobility. For the Black man, and I think I can say this unequivocally, for the Black man, the most important tool toward upward mobility is a solid education. We look at NBAs and we look at the NBA and we look at the football spaces and we see them earning millions of dollars, multimillionaires. How many of them are there?
Correct.
How many Black men within the population of America can make it into that space?
It's
You
a
know,
it's a small percentage.
exactly, a very, very small percentage. However, education has consistently been shown among the social indices as one of the markers of socioeconomic growth for Black men.
Correct.
And it can't hurt.
Well,
It can't hurt. I always say it's better to be unemployed with an education than to be unemployed without an education because you have less of a chance. Final thing I'm going to say about that is that the income earning potential of someone with a college degree versus someone without a college degree is dramatically different. You earn so much more and the possibilities are so much greater if you gain a good education. I think we need to bring that to the fore once more, Dr. Cross, and stop allowing it to recede. Stop listening to those voices that say that keep saying a college education is obsolete.
Well,
yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
And that too, I believe it's part of the distractions to lower those who may not have the guidance to think that's not the way out. I strongly agree with you. Education is the best equalizer, and education does provide a better chance of getting out of our situation or challenges. Or if you're born into poverty or in the lower class, education can be what helps to get you into a different social class. And to go back to what you shared about athletes and education, or athletes and opportunities, I can tell you I started this journey as an athlete myself. So I was an athlete. That's how I started my journey. But came across a research some years ago. They were talking about athletes and doctors. And they were saying in the presentation that it's easier to become a doctor than it is to become a football player or any those top sport that you can think about. So, but I went back that documentary or that series, or I couldn't find it again. But I came across it, and I've shared it with others that they too have seen it. But a lot of our younger Black males in the community, or even older, still think that's the best way to change our lives and our situation. But it's always education, as you mentioned. And that's one thing that we sure need to push more if we want to change the narrative, if we want to break the old paradigm. So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. So my next question is, what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? I know you've been in education for over 20 years and it still is, but who inspired you or influenced you to go down this path?
When I first went into the classroom, in Jamaica, we have what we call education officers, which would be equivalent to a superintendent of schools here in the United States. And when I first went into the classroom, and an unqualified, pre-trained teacher, an education officer came to examine the school, assess the school, and she happened to come into my classroom. And she was so impressed that she insisted that I need to go to Teachers College. She wrote a recommendation, and a recommendation coming from a superintendent of schools to a Teachers College is a big deal. And so I was accepted, even though I applied very late. I remember applying, and folks in my community were telling me, one of my relatives were telling me, man, you better go back into the class because it doesn't seem as if they're going to be responding. But I was resolute. After I realized that God had given me a gift there, I was resolute, and I waited, and I certainly, and before you knew it, I had the acceptance letter in my hand, and there I was, and the rest is history. But along the way, there have been many people that have impacted my decision to remain in education. And the most important ones have been students. There's a certain joy that as a teacher that fills your, as an educator, that fills your very being when you see that spark, that light bulb go off in a student's mind, and you see their eyes grow, and they take that deep breath, and you realize that they got it. It clicked.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel, wow, it's so satisfying. And you realize that after it clicks and they got it, that student becomes so empowered.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's almost as if they can move mountains, and the energy that they gain from that helps them to overcome more obstacles, helps them to achieve more, to grow more, to excel more, to persevere more. And then there is a certain satisfaction that comes when you are on the street and you hear professor, and you look around at the other student, and you have a vague memory, and then they remind you, and you're all like, oh yes, and they tell you that they are the CEO of this company.
Yeah.
Or they are Dr. So-and-so, or you just feel so good about that. I think these things have caused me to remain in education, and the students and the former influences of education officers and other teachers.
Yes, we all are inspired by others, and do get a good feeling when you know you're making an impact. So I do understand that clearly. But and if you ask a lot of the educators or teachers or professors, they will tell you that's one of the reasons why they stay. Not so much of the pay, and even not so much of the environment, but the impact they're having on the students. And because when you see a student, realize something, and you see the shift, and you realize that now they are taking life on from a more positive standpoint, you can say, yes, the work has been done. You can feel good about that type of experience. So I do understand what you're saying with that experience with making impact with the students. And yes, we all, as I said earlier, we all come across people on our journey that help to strengthen us as we go on the journey itself to do what we're passionate about. And that also help us to sustain our stay on the journey, to continue doing the work that matters. Because again, Black men in the classroom really matters, not only for the Black students, but for all students, as research point out that we do make an impact in the classroom, especially as Black men. So my next question to you is, what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
My perspective has multiple angles.
Yeah.
On one hand, I believe that society is recognizing more and more the value of the Black male, okay, and the contribution that the Black male brings to society, that positive effect that you just spoke about, both in families, in the workspace, institutions of learning, and in other spaces. And I think more and more the society is realizing this and growing to accept this. However, as one great brilliant scientist once said, for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction.
Yeah.
The fact that this recognition is coming to the fore brings about backlash.
Okay.
And there is a growing group also that would want to continue to view the Black male from a deficit perspective. That is, they want to continue to see the Black male as underachievers, as derelict, as worthless, not contributing. That's how they want to continue to view the Black male. When the data doesn't show this.
Okay, yeah.
Data shows that the Black male has been systematically excluded from opportunities that will allow him to positively contribute to the growth of society, the growth of his family.
Correct.
The data shows that, but the data does not show the Black man as in a deficit life, as an underachiever. You look at data such as we used to question, where are all the Black men? Mm-hmm. And they used to say that they are in prison. But nobody questioned why were they in prison. They just assumed that Black men were criminals, not questioning the criminal justice system, which has disproportionately criminalized the behavior of our young Black men, the adultification of Black boys in school, where and as an educator, I can speak authoritatively on this, where you find that Black boys behavior that would be seen as normal for an 8-year-old of other groups is seen as abnormal for Black boys, and they are adultified and castigated and criminalized for just being children.
Correct.
The data shows that these Black men are disproportionately criminalized driving while Black.
Yes.
Simple stops, simple traffic stops can cause you to either go to jail, lose your driver's license, thereby losing your source of income.
Correct.
And tragically, Dr. Cross, it can cause you to lose your life.
Oh, yes.
That's the state of the Black male in society. So I think there is a duality existing. You have our HBCUs that have been undergirding the growth of Black men. You have programs such as Am I My Brother's Keeper? And you have researchers such as yourself that are championing the worth of Black men and are trying to shine a spotlight on their positive contributions to society. But you have another group that is trying to continue to cast a shadow over them and cast them in a deficit light.
And thanks for such a thoughtful response. And you're right, we are still seen by some from a deficit perspective, while there are others are willing to highlight and point out the great things that concerning what Black men are doing. So it's that we have to continue doing the work to counter the negative that keeps coming to the surface when it comes to us as Black men. So we have to take charge of changing the narrative. We have to take charge of painting a more positive image. We have to take charge of writing a story that we want, not the story that is given to us, not the story that is covered mostly in the media, but the story that we want to be about ourselves. And we have to get to the lead of this movement in regards to changing the narrative. We have to be the ones making those decisions when it comes to us and what we want to say, to be said about us as Black men. It's not going to be easy because there are counter narratives to, as you mentioned, to keep us in that light of from a deficit perspective.
Absolutely.
But there is enough happening, which is positive, that we need to get behind and we need to support and we need to keep doing so we can change the perspective. Because when we do it, it doesn't only affect us, it affects those who are seeing us. Because you talk to some people at times and you realize you can see that they have a different perspective of who a Black man is. You'll be talking to them and then it's like they drop their guard and start to view you from a different perspective, because in their mind, they may have that negative stereotype or a negative label when it comes to Black men. So we have a lot of work to do. And it may seem like a burden at times, but we have to realize that we have an obligation, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation that's coming behind us. So that's important.
Can I just add here, the work that you are doing, you are a prolific writer. And there's a saying that the person who frames the conversation wins. Another saying says, when the story is told by the hunter always wins.
Correct.
But if the lion should tell the story, you would really find out the truth about what happens to the hunter. Well, what I'm saying is that we need to begin to tell our own stories.
Correct.
You are consistently doing that and allowing through this forum the stories of Black men to be told. I'd like to see more of this done across the board. I'd like to see more Black writers. We have a plethora of excellent Black writers, historically and contemporarily. But I'd like to see more. I'd like to see us take charge of our own narrative, determine how it is framed, determine the direction that it goes, so that we can be painted in the light that we actually should be painted in, or shone. The light that actually should shine on us will shine.
That's right. Yeah, we have to realize how important it is to really tell our story. And man, it is so important. It is so important that we take charge of where we go from here. A few years ago, well, that was kind of the saying, where do we go from here? But we have to take charge of our story. We have to be willing to share the positives about us. Yes, challenge each other, of course, to be the best version of ourselves. But we have to be willing to share the positives when it comes to us and what we're doing, if we're going to change the narrative and change some of the misconceptions that is out there about us as Black men. So my next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
Quite a few of them. I'm going to take it from a career awakening. As an educator, you practice your craft and you try to excel in it, and you try to adapt new thinkings, new pedagogies. And what was life-changing for me was when I really began to understand the question of equity versus equality. That was pivotal for me. That changed my entire perspective and shifted my paradigm. My whole educational philosophy shifted. When I realized that equality as a goal itself might be good, but equity is how we get to that equality. What do I mean? Well, the fact is that as an educator, everybody does not learn the same way.
Right.
Particularly Black groups, Black men, people tend to look at Black men as not homogeneous. Well, sorry, as a homogeneous group. And they ignore the heterogeneity of Black men, not realizing that there are differences existing within this group. And so they try to treat them as monolith, thinking that one suit fits everyone.
Correct, yeah.
One strategy will meet the need of everyone. And there are a multiplicity of needs within the group. When I realized that I had to begin to position each learner, each person I met, each lesson I taught, each strategic plan I put forward had to be positioned in a way that it would meet the needs of each person individually. That shifted my whole thinking.
And I really appreciate that perspective, because that's important. Because a lot of times we do think that the same approach will solve, one approach will solve all the problems. And especially when it comes to us. And I do focus a lot on empowering Black male students. And that's one of the things that I do see happening. Yes, this approach may be good and it may work with a group prior to, but it may not work with this group. And it's not because this group don't have the cognitive ability, but your approach to this group may be or need to be different. Or what you think their needs are, maybe that's not their needs. So, and that's where the equity and equality, because yeah, you put in the resources that it shows equal that you're doing the same thing. But from an equity standpoint, their needs may be different. And sometimes we don't take a look at their needs. So we just decide we're going to get some resources, and this resource should work without understanding the need. But I know you were saying something, so if you want to finish that thought, Please,
Oh no,
sorry to interrupt you.
you actually completed the thought for me.
Okay, okay. Yes,
Right.
because in this space, sometimes you do realize that's what's happening. And not everybody will be open to a new perspective. And sometimes you may get pushback when you share your thoughts on changing certain perspective or approach to get better results. But not everyone is open to changing what they have been doing. So sometimes you do get pushbacks, but I really appreciate that perspective on the equality and equity when it comes to change and benefit and stuff like that. So, but I also would go back to what you had said. I also, with your pivotal moment, that's really great when it comes to education. But I thought one of your pivotal moment would have been that time when you been a teacher's aide. But I will can get back to that part. But I really appreciate you having that shift in how you approach educating students. So my next question is, what life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
I think a life lesson that I've learned is that I need to trust the process. When you put a plan in place, work the plan. Don't jump from one variable to the other. Stick to the plan. Sometimes it might seem as if you're not getting where you need to go fast enough, or you're not getting where you need to go, but stick to the plan. Nevertheless, you need to also be, while you're sticking to the plan, be open-minded, because sometimes your plan needs to be adjusted. So you have to be reflective with regards to your plan. Stick to your plan, but be reflective of your plan. See what works and is not working, but stick to that plan. Don't get distracted. There are many people who will tell you that your dream is just that, a dream.
Mhm.
Well, if you don't stick to the plan and work that plan, the dream will remain just that, a dream.
Right. And I think that is a great reminder to everyone to trust the process and don't jump from variables to variables or from ideas to ideas or trying to do everything because you see someone else doing it. So that's what you want to do. And then you sway from your goal and your vision and what you want to accomplish. So I think that is a great reminder for all of us, for everyone who have the desire to do something in life. Remain focused, remain consistent, and stick to the plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is really important and a great reminder because with all the different things that's happening in society today, people be jumping from ideas to ideas or wanting to be something else because somebody else is doing it and forgetting what they are actually doing and whatever they have started. So my next question is, before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find you and help support your work that you're doing to make a difference?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I just look me up on LinkedIn, Rory T. Richards. I'm there. You can contact me via LinkedIn. I respond to my in messages quite regularly. And if you want to really support the work that I am doing, which is to ensure that I create an equitable environment within the classroom and provide as many opportunities as possible for growth among our Black men, providing opportunities for them to feel as if they belong in some of the spaces that they have been traditionally told that they don't belong in. That's the work that I really emphasize. If you want us to talk about this, to strategize, reach out to me via LinkedIn. I'll be happy to have that conversation and move forward.
Okay, great. And I will definitely put that contact way to contact you in the description so they can reach out to you and support and even to have a dialogue around equity because that's one of the topics right now, especially in education. So I'll definitely make sure I put it in the description. for them to reach out to you. My final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
That's a thought-provoking question, and I've often asked myself that question. I want to be remembered as the person that advocated for the most vulnerable of society, that positioned himself as an advocate for the disenfranchised, as an advocate for those who might not necessarily have the opportunities that everyone has, and as an advocate for Black men,
Man,
success and growth of Black men.
that's needed, and that's also appreciated, because sometimes you find yourself, if you are not in those group, as you mentioned, you were a part of that group, the disenfranchised, the underserved. And as a Black man myself, we always need people out there who will advocate or who will champion causes that make things better for us. So, Mr. Richards, man, it was great talking to you, or talking with you, or having this conversation about the impact that we can have in our society or in our communities, and how to make an impact. Thanks for being here on the Black Male Impact, man. The conversation was great. I appreciate you being here.
I really appreciate you having me, Dr. Cross, and keep up the great work that you're doing.
Man,
Changing
thank you very much. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And listeners, as always, please continue to support the work we're doing here on the Black Male Impact. Your support is appreciated, and your support helps us to continue to do the work that matters. Again, thanks for being here on the Black Male Impact. As always, our goal is to create positive change.